What if I told you that one of the most important battles in American automotive history wasn't fought on a racetrack, but in boardrooms, back alleys, and rulebooks written in pencil? This wasn't a rivalry built on handshakes or gentlemen's agreements. This was a quiet, ruthless war. A war where every win felt personal. And at the center of it all stood two names that refused to back down: Ford Motor Company and Chrysler Corporation. By the late 1960s, Ford looked untouchable. Massive factories, deep pockets, corporate confidence. They didn't just build cars, they built empires. Chrysler, on the other hand, was constantly fighting for oxygen. Smaller budgets, higher risks, less room for mistakes. And that pressure shaped the company into something dangerous. Because when you don't have the biggest hammer, you learn where to strike. Ford believed power came from scale. If something needed fixing, they threw money, manpower, and management at it. Chrysler couldn't afford that approach. Instead, they relied on sharp engineers, bold decisions, and a willingness to push every rule right to the edge, sometimes past it. Nowhere was this more obvious than on the track. In drag racing and NASCAR, winning wasn't just about trophies. A win on Sunday meant sales on Monday. Ford knew this and played the long game. Chrysler took the shortcut and made it brutal. Their cars were lighter, stripped down, and barely disguised as street machines. Engines were officially rated at conservative numbers, but everyone in the pits knew the truth. These cars weren't built to impress accountants. They were built to embarrass rivals. Ford noticed, quickly. Complaints started piling up. Rulebooks were rewritten. Inspections became stricter. Chrysler would get shut down and somehow come back even stronger. Every time Ford closed a door, Chrysler found a window. Sometimes it felt like the rules only applied after Chrysler had already crossed the finish line. The rivalry turned ugly behind closed doors. Engineers moved between companies. Ideas leaked. Designs evolved suspiciously fast. Ford worked through committees and approvals. Chrysler worked through late nights and sheer defiance. What Ford perfected for mass production, Chrysler ripped apart for speed. But time was running out. The muscle car era was burning too bright to last. Emissions regulations were coming. Fuel prices were about to explode. Everyone could feel it. Ford began preparing for a safer future. Chrysler did the opposite. They went all in. Louder, faster, riskier than ever. It was thrilling, and it was reckless. Sales began to slip. Costs soared. Chrysler's daring approach pushed the company dangerously close to collapse. From the outside, it looked like Ford had won simply by surviving. Like patience had beaten aggression. The knife fight seemed over. But this story doesn't end with a knockout. Because just when Ford thought the battle was finished, Chrysler was about to make a move that would change everything. Not with horsepower, not with racing, but with strategy. And that's where this rivalry truly gets personal. So tell me, how did this first part feel? Did you expect this rivalry to be this intense? Just when it looked like the fight was over, the real twist arrived. In the late 1970s, Chrysler was on the edge of collapse. Not struggling, collapsing. Factories were bleeding money. Dealerships were nervous. The company that once terrified Ford on the track was now fighting to survive at all. Most people assumed this was the end of the story. Then one man walked through the door. His name was Lee Iacocca. And here's the part that made it sting. He didn't come from nowhere. He came from Ford. Iacocca was the golden boy at Ford, the man behind massive successes, including cars that defined an era. But corporate politics pushed him out. Ford thought they'd cut loose a problem. What they actually did was hand Chrysler a weapon. Iacocca didn't bring engines or blueprints. He brought something far more dangerous: clarity. He knew exactly how Ford thought, how they priced cars, how they marketed them, how slow big corporations could be when fear crept in. And he used that knowledge ruthlessly. Chrysler didn't try to outmuscle Ford anymore. That era was gone. Instead, they changed the battlefield. Front-wheel drive, fuel efficiency, practical cars people actually needed. While Ford was still emotionally tied to the glory days, Chrysler quietly rebuilt itself for a new reality. The K-car platform wasn't sexy, it wasn't loud, but it worked, and it saved the company. Then came the move that truly flipped the script: the minivan. Ford had sketches, ideas, concepts floating around internal departments. Chrysler executed. They didn't overthink it. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They launched, and suddenly families across America were buying Chrysler products in massive numbers. For the first time in years, Ford was reacting. The rivalry had evolved. It was no longer about drag strips or horsepower bragging rights. It was about survival, relevance, and ego. Ford still had size and money. Chrysler had momentum and leadership that wasn't afraid to bet everything. And here's the uncomfortable truth: both companies needed each other. Ford's pressure forced Chrysler to innovate or die. Chrysler's defiance forced Ford to adapt instead of coasting. This wasn't a clean rivalry with winners and losers. It was a knife fight where both sides walked away scarred. By the time the dust settled, the golden age of American muscle was over. But its consequences shaped everything that followed, from modern performance cars to the way automakers think about risk today. So when people talk about Ford versus Chrysler like it was just another corporate rivalry, they miss the point. This wasn't competition. This was personal. Two giants, two philosophies, one brutal era where hesitation meant extinction. And the echoes of that fight are still under the hood of every American performance car you see today.